All right. In this Q&A session, I'm going to try to answer all your questions and comments that you've made for the last couple of weeks. All right. So let's not waste time and let's get started because there are a lot of questions here. Spear Jin 5085 says, comprehensible input sounds great in theory, but it doesn't work, or at least is completely inefficient, which is Mikkel's entire point. I'm not willing to invest 2,000 hours into something that might work. I want real results. I've spent the last 9 months trying comprehensible input, and I can't speak at all. Yes, that's the problem. That happened to me as well with several languages. Understood that 100% everything easily. I read dozens of books in the language, and I can name the languages as well. Happened to me with French, happened to me with Italian, happened to me with Portuguese. Until I started doing specific exercises for speaking, I couldn't speak the languages, despite knowing all the vocab and all the grammar and understanding the languages really, really well, like effortlessly, because I mean they're not that different from Spanish. But yeah, over 100 books that I read in French, and I still couldn't have a proper conversation. Just, I mean, I could say things, but you know, I really struggled to form sentences, and I didn't have, for some reason, I didn't have the vocab. Well, later I figured out why, because that vocab was, I understood it, but then when I needed it, I couldn't recall fast enough that vocabulary, so I couldn't use it in real time. That's the problem with comprehensible input. Yes, comprehensible input is good. You should do it 100%, but it's not the only thing you should be doing at all. I've been reading a lot of Paul Nation stuff recently, and I agree for the most part with his view on this instead of Krashen's. Paul Nation says that around 25% of your learning time should be comprehensible input, which I agree with. Most of it should be, especially in the beginning, just learn more vocab. Even later on, you should learn more and more vocab. Learn more vocab, do speaking exercises, active recall, shadowing, all that kind of stuff. And then do some listening every day. Yes, and reading also. It's good. But do not expect to become fluent just by reading and watching videos and listening, because it doesn't work like that. Speaking is a skill. You need to practice a skill. Like, for example, a comparison. It's a lot of people will say that it doesn't make sense, but anyone who is into sports will understand this. I'm injured right now. My shoulder is not destroyed, but it's damaged. I can't really do any kind of martial arts, and I've been like that for a few months. So I'm watching loads of, and I'm gonna make a video on this, by the way. Watching lots of instructional videos to learn techniques, jujitsu, different submissions and sweeps and throws, and judo throws, and wrestling and all that. And I'm using active recall in a way that makes sense if you can't physically execute the moves. So I'm learning them by watching videos. I'll watch the video. Okay, like this is how you throw someone from over under this position, that position. Like this is how you counter whatever move. And there's a series of. It's basically like learning a sentence, right? It's like learning a long sentence. Like you put your hand here and your leg here, and you push here, and then you move this way, and so it's like a bunch of steps, like 5-10 steps that you have to execute properly in a row. If you just watch the video, instructional video, that's basically nothing. If you don't actually try to do those exercises, like when you don't practice in real life and you don't drill them, like if you just try, like you watch the video and you try to execute them in real life in a sparring session, you might be able to pull it off if you're an athletic freak, but probably not if you don't drill them. But I can't even drill them. So will I learn just by watching videos? No. I am using active recall, and it's still not as effective as not as effective as drilling them and then doing them live. But just right after watching the video, and then all the previous videos from previous days, if I just visualize myself in the position and then visualize myself executing all the moves and try to remember, okay, this was hand here first, and I push this, and I grab the knee, and try to remember in order all the moves, and then try again. This is going to make me remember much better. It's still not anywhere near as good as drilling them in real life, because in real life you have to remember all the steps and also execute it, so you develop the muscle memory. But at the moment, it's the best thing I can do. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking so much about. Anyway, yeah, comprehensible inputs alone. Obviously, it's way better than nothing, and you should do some comprehensible input, but you should do everything else as well. And specifically for speaking, focus on speaking exercises, active recall, shadowing, lots of listening and repeating, like lots of drilling, same sentences over and over again, and then those same sentences translate into the target language and get feedback. You learn with feedback, and you learn by trying, like trial and error and feedback and drill. That's how you learn skills. And speaking is a skill. Comprehension is a skill as well, but it's a different one. They're related, but they're not exactly the same. Anyway, that was way too much just to say that comprehensible input by itself is not enough. Flash Life says, how many new words can you learn per day in a foreign language? And he says, yes, but actually recall them in listening or conversation will never happen. It really depends how you learn them. You see, if you just look at the list, no, you will not remember them. But if you practice active recall, you first memorize them with mnemonics and then review them with active recall and in complete sentences, and you try to say them aloud, and then you get the feedback, you will actually recall those sentences and all those words in conversation when you need them, if that's the skill you practice. This is the problem with comprehensible input. You just getting everything passively. You're not practicing the skill of remembering the words and the sentences fast enough to then use them in conversation. But if what you're practicing is remembering and saying things fast, so like in real time, like you need to say this sentence, and you get the sentence you need to say, and you try to say it in the language, and then you see if you got it right or wrong. Then you practicing the skill of thinking how to say it as fast as you can, thinking it as fast as you can, not saying it as fast as you can. But you have to think fast, and then you get in feedback. So yes, depending on how you do it, you can learn a lot of vocab fast, and also a lot of vocab actively, to then use it effectively if you do it right. What else? What's more important in language learning, vocabulary or grammar? That depends on the language. Anyway, you need both. An isolated language like Vietnamese has little grammar, as it has no flexion but word order and helps syllables. On the other hand, if you have to mass up at least 8,000 words for basic understanding, as it is highly mixed up language with several words for same things depending on region, your education background, blah blah blah. Whereas my mother language, German, grammar gives you a difficult start. It simply cannot be ignored. It can. You sound. I mean, you won't sound great if you ignore the grammar in German, but you can ignore the grammar. Uh, on the other hand, basic German has little basic words, but many derivations and combinations, making new words much more intelligible. The thing with German is, by the way, I'm moving, not moving, I'm traveling to Germany tomorrow, visiting some friends, doing some work there. So anyway, even German. Grammar is complicated, yes. Russian, even more complicated. Japanese, very complicated. Basque, my native language, extremely complicated, although logical grammar. But it doesn't change the fact that you can learn it in context relatively easily, as long as you practice enough. And neighbor's kid's going crazy. Um, and if you know the vocab, if you know the vocab grammar, you can learn it in context. If you know all the words in a sentence, you just have to keep practicing, and then is when the input is comprehensible enough. If you know the grammar, okay, you don't know exactly the tense or whatever, but those things you learn by the context much easier than learning vocab in context. Because grammar, even the language with the most complicated grammar, has much less grammar than vocab. You don't have thousands of grammar items to learn. You always have thousands of words to learn. You even in a language that has super complicated grammar, let's say like my native language, Basque or Russian, um, you can speak with really bad grammar. Or German, like if you der, die, das, and then all the conjugation, all the like mit, them, and like if you do all that wrong, if the nouns and the verbs you're using are correct, people will understand you, and you will understand people. Yes, you'll speak at an A2 level, but that's a start. That's way better than not being able to communicate. And knowing all the grammar really well, but not having the vocab, you wouldn't be able to speak. So yes, vocabulary first. In fact, vocabulary first, second, and third, most important thing by far. Then grammar and pronunciation. And I would say pronunciation is more important than grammar because, and especially for languages like English, a lot of people complain that they can't understand, also for other languages. But if you know all the words but you can't understand native speakers, it's because your knowledge of pronunciation is bad. You don't know what real English is supposed to sound like. A lot of Spanish people, but I know my accent's not perfect, but I don't say mountain, for example. Everyone in Spain says mountain for mountain, or things like that, like vegetables for vegetables. And then when they hear it in real life, they're like, what? And because they don't know the right pronunciation. So obviously the right pronunciation, you learn it by listening, right? It's not and by doing shadowing and things like that. But yeah, lots of vocab first. Like most important thing, vocabulary. If you don't have the vocab, you have nothing. Then pronunciation, especially for comprehension, and then grammar. Grammar is the least important and the easiest. Believe it or not, the easiest to learn if you do it right. And if there's one thing that comprehensible input is great for, is learning grammar. If you do enough listening and reading, you learn the grammar. Fine. You could also speed up the process by doing active recall with complete sentences. Lots of grammar there. All the grammar is included. You just translate the sentences into the target language and then get the right answer. And sooner rather than later, you'll get most of them or all of them right. Okay, Complete Guitarist says, this advice is exactly the opposite of what the science has discovered. But then what do you expect? Everyone thinks they know best. What is the science? Who is this? so this is what you get when you say that comprehensible input and crashing theories don't work all that well. And people will start calling you things like you're anti-science and things like blah blah blah. But then if you read or listen to any other linguist, like most other schools of thought, they'll all tell you that Krashen's theories are very, being generous, they are flawed, and being less generous, they're basically outdated and proven wrong, and they've been proven wrong by many experiments and research and everything. So whenever they bring in the science, like that's wrong because the science, dude. Even linguists don't agree with each other. Most of them, like all the academics. So the side, there's no. This is no math. This is not. Uh, there's no like two plus two is four. So this is not engineering, like there are hypotheses. It's the comprehensible input hypothesis. It's a theory, and there aren't even like, have you even read the Krashen's works? Uh, most of Not most, like his data is just anecdotal evidence. It's been observed in immigrant kids in school. It's always like it's been observed in this and that. Like I haven't seen him like talk about like we took 100 students with comprehensible input and 100 students with this other system and this amount, all these other systems, and like all of them had similar backgrounds and similar like scores and IQs and everything, and they spent the same amount of time learning, and comprehensible input got way better results. There's none of that. It's been observed, and immigrant kids learn really fast, and blah blah blah. It's just the kind of stuff. It's just anecdotal evidence. There's no science on any of this, and I don't have scientific. I mean, I've conducted lots of experiments with people, but obviously no PhD having like academic will accept this kind of stuff. But and obviously didn't follow any like PhD level whatever they do for experiments. But anyone who's getting results and results fast is doing something else. They're not doing comprehensible input, and all this stuff works. I'm not giving you anything that doesn't work. It's all stuff that doesn't. I don't use anything that I come up with myself. Everything is learned from somewhere else. I just combine it in a way that is. I take the best of everywhere and combine it in a way that makes it a really efficient learning system. Like I learned mnemonics from a bunch of different people, but mostly a Spanish memory champion who's an absolute machine at memorizing lists of words and things like that. I thought that's great for vocab. Let's do that. I know it works because I saw it worked with him, with a bunch of other people. So I was like, I'm going to learn that. Language islands. That comes from Boris Shechtman or Boris Shechtman, in Russian. That come up with. I improved it in a way that's, well, at least I improved it in a way that works better for my own purposes. But again, Boris Shechtman never claimed that was like this was one way of doing things. No, he had this. He always said that you should be as language islands should be as flexible as possible and suit your, like they should be adapted for your goals, right? So there's no science on this. There's results, and then there's people who talk and do nothing, and those are usually the academic types. Okay, what else? Are children better at learning languages? And then John says, a toddler learning to speak and an adult learning a foreign language are doing different things. Yeah. People go on about the plasticity of the child's brain, as if all you have to do is put the child in a room with native speakers of a foreign language and they will come out fluent. People say that adults should learn a foreign language the same way that little children learn. So do I have to crawl my hands and knees and pluck all the flour out of a teddy bear the way I did when I was 2.5? I mean, that'd be fun to watch, but don't get me wrong. I think there are aspects to children's learning that are really important. But if you are an adult, process will be a bit different. grammar and vocabulary have some value, but building and speaking and reading fluency are crucial for adults. Yeah, children and adults don't learn the same way for a bunch of different reasons. First one being that children are not fully developed humans. They not as smart as adults. So yes, the neuroplasticity, blah blah blah, but they also their ability to understand is much lower. So that's a disadvantage for them. So as an adult, you can understand like, okay, this is grammar and this works like this, and uh, so yeah, there are things that children do better. Like, well, the main advantage they have is having way more time than you. Children just use the language all day if you immerse them. You can't afford to do that. You've got stuff to do, right? you you can't just join a school in whatever place. You want to learn Chinese, and okay, we're just gonna move to China, join a school. I want a bunch of kids there, and uh, do like middle school and high school again for 8 years. There, like, no, you can't do that because you've got things to do. You need money, and you've got a family, probably, hopefully, and yeah, it's so they've got a lot of time. You don't. That's one of the differences. And then the other one is that they're not as afraid of making mistakes and looking stupid. A lot of adults are very afraid of making mistakes, looking stupid. That's where the speaking gets nerfed, gets stunted, because they never really push themselves to talk in front of people, because they don't want to look stupid, so they never really try to speak. This is why you should use language islands and do lots of shadowing and active recall, all that on your own. So when you're in front of people, you're super confident because you'll be using sentences you've been practicing over and over again at home. But yeah, are children better? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think an adult with a good learning strategy learns much faster than children if given the same amount of hours. Uh, how long does it take to learn a language? Again, you should check out Language Jones's videos on this subject. I can already imagine him angrily ranting the camera like, "No, you shouldn't do that." Blah 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 blah. Uh, you should be ashamed of yourself. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, whatever. Like, nothing against that guy, but just don't like his videos. Honestly, it just it mostly talks about like, this is what's wrong with the language learning community or whatever. Like, it doesn't really talk and it doesn't really add anything to anyone trying to learn a language. It's mostly talk. It's just like, is this word racist? Yeah, should this thing be like? Is this politically correct? And honestly, I don't care about all that crap. What else? Any thoughts on how to shadow if you're the one writing the sentences? Get a native speaker to record the sentences, for example. I wouldn't do that. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it might sound a little bit weird. So the way I do it is I use text-to-speech software like TTS Maker, and I take all my sentences and translate them into the language, and then create audio files for them. And I create two types of audio files. One in which there's just each sentence is repeated once, so it's a normal text, all your sentences one after another, and that's for listening only. And for shadowing, what I do is 5 columns. Actually, I'll show you. I'll show you a video tutorial on this at some point, maybe later this week. So 5 columns where the sentences are copy pasted, so that each sentence is repeated twice by the text-to-speech software, so that you get to repeat each sentence 5 times. You hear it 5 times, you repeat it after 5 times. This makes it much easier to. Well, the whole exercise is much better and easier, because if you have to listen and repeat each sentence only once, it's going to be very difficult. You're constantly changing and you don't have enough time to learn a sentence. If you're doing several reps with the same one, with each rep, your pronunciation gets better, your accent gets better, intonation, everything, and it helps you understand grammar and vocab much better. Trader Jones 1337 says, "You are my forebuild." Ah, I should learn it. I should pronounce it with a German. "You are my forebuild. Thank you for your valuable content, sir." Danke. Vorbild is can't really translate that from German. Vorbild means like your example to follow. Yeah, I guess idol, something like that. Anyway, thanks. May Beide, probably also German, says, it is not of importance what you do, the method. What counts is, yeah, definitely German. What counts is that you do it. Okay, one more time. It is not of importance what you do, the method. What counts is that you do it. Hours spent. My Chinese teacher. Okay, so that was a quote. I disagree. What you do with your time counts a lot. I always tell you to don't count the hours, make the hours count. That said, of course, the more time you spend with the language, in contact with the language, the more you'll improve. But what you do during those contact hours really matters. If you do something that's not all that effective, Duolingo or just watch dumb videos, you can do thousands of hours and still not speak the language fluently. If you spend hundreds of hours doing shadowing, yeah, you will speak very well. Cool Brother says, one thing that really increased my advanced vocabulary was learning to write a fiction novel in my target language. That's quite advanced. Writing my own story was a good activity to find weaknesses in my knowledge. Actually, that's actually really, if you like writing, that's actually a really good idea. I suppose you used a translator, so you were writing, typing on your own language, and then you were copying the translation, I guess. But yeah, that's a really good idea because you learn lots of vocab that you wouldn't otherwise use. If you want advanced vocab, yeah, this is a good idea. If you like writing, which most people don't. But if you like, I like it. Maybe I should try that. Okay, Brendan Hunter says, I've started doing this. Language islands. I've started doing language islands. I make a few short sentences of some topic like travel, food, compliments, sports, etc. It's easier to recall and it gives me around 10 or 15 sentences per topic. These are best for conversational fluency. Imagine yourself in a bar talking to someone. These mini sentences will go a long way. Yeah, one of the best, and I made a video recently about this. One of the best ways to make language islands is to imagine yourself in a situation and then talk as much as you can. Write everything down that you would say, and then take those sentences and deconstruct them, and so that each sentence has as many variations as possible. So instead of just, if you have I want to go to, I don't know, I want to go to Italy on holiday because I really like history and I want to visit Rome. Whatever. That's a long sentence. That's pretty difficult. If you translate it in Italian, that would be pretty complicated, right? But if you then take that sentence and break it up into I want to visit Italy, and then I want to visit Italy someday, and I want to visit Italy someday because blah blah blah. And then I really like history. I really like ancient history. I really like ancient Rome. But you make as many sentences as possible out of that. So then they're all related, so they're easy to learn, and it gives you a lot of flexible and a lot of sentences that are easy to learn and easy to use because they're flexible. So yeah, I highly recommend doing that. I just created a video recently on how to do this. You should probably watch it and start applying it. Uh, the fiery feisty hick says some people say it's bad to translate from English to new target language because it supposedly keeps you constantly in English mode instead of deeply absorbing the language patterns of the new language. Is it false? Yeah, there's no problem with translation. In fact, translating into the target language is a great way to learn. It's much better than input because if you get an input, some of you are still thinking in your native language or in English. They say something like, oh, that means, and then you think in English. But if you get the sentences in English and you have to say them in the target language, you're constantly forcing yourself to, you're making your brain work. How do I say this in the target language? And then if you also get feedback, then you're getting corrected. So it's a great way to learn. Translation into the target language and then correction. I think this is what's the Italian guy? Lampariello. I think this is what he does a lot. A lot of translation. He does it. He I think he writes, and he does it with random like assimil and things like that, which I think it's a really good method to learn grammar and vocab. That's basically active recall as well, translating and then correcting yourself. Personally, I'd rather do it in speaking because in real life you do a lot more. You want to be able to speak, not write, in most languages, unless you want to use the language for work or something. I do it in speaking and using my language islands first. So I learn everything that's I learn to say everything that's important first instead of just random stuff like he does. But yeah, translating into the target language and then getting feedback. It's a really good way to learn. Uh, Cool Brother says, my favorite way of learning vocab is using the sentence mining method. I'll watch something in my target language and make vocab sentence cards with audio from the input. That's also a good idea. Yeah, as long as then you do everything else that you want to, like everything else with the sentences that you want to learn. So let's say you watch whatever. You watch a series. You watch Shogun, in which I just did. I just binge watched the whole thing in Japanese. Um, every time you hear something cool, or you like the way it sounds, it's probably not going to be useful. If it's medieval talk, it's not gonna be very useful in real life. But whatever, it sounds cool. Um, you write it down. You get the translation, and you put them in flashcards, and you keep doing this with everything when you watch and when you listen to stuff, when you read. It's a good way to learn cool sentences this way. I've got I've got a lot of sentences that I learned watching German films. My German friends always laugh, and sometimes they're like, Where did that come from?" And it's like from the Downfall, the film, like the guy with the mustache ranting and stuff. Like I've memorized lots of lines from there. It's quite fun to use when like meeting Germans. Anyway, and I did that way. Just like while watching, I was just writing down stuff. Uh, okay, Adachi says after years of focusing on input and vocab acquisition in Anki and being frustrated from having good comprehension, I'm able to follow the news on TV and technical discussion at work. That's already good. but being unable to output past a rudimentary level, I've been recently using your method to rehearse NL to TL, a native language to target language, sentences, still using Anki, and it seems to be working well at improving my output, both in writing and speaking. Yeah, if you, again, another guy who did lots of input, apparently, and then also vocab. But then in speaking, even if you understand well, it's hard to think fast enough and confidently enough if you don't usually practice your speaking, then either you can't think fast enough or you're not confident because you think you're going to make mistakes, so you hesitate to speak, and then by the time you're going to say something, it just it just the opportunity just it's gone. You can't just because conversations are fast. So yeah, do active recall. Just translate it into the target language. Try to do it aloud, say it, get the feedback, and if you do it over and over again, you'll very quickly be able to say a lot more by doing that. Okay, Liam Byrne says, "What is this video of this lad speaking English? I want to judge for my Jesus Christ." What is this video of this lad speaking Spanish? I want to judge for myself. I have 150 hours of dreaming Spanish. Dan can't say anything but getting to kind of understand. Why don't you try your method with Irish language and let's see you speak and understand Irish in 100 hours? You will need 6,000 hours. Ooh. Hey, punctuation, commas, full stop, question mark somewhere. It's just a wall of text with no. Jesus, man. What is this video of this lad speaking Spanish? I want to judge for myself. I have 150 hours of dreaming Spanish done. Can't say anything but getting to kind of understand. Why don't you try your method with Irish language and let's see you speak and understand Irish in 100 hours. You will need 6,000 hours. Okay. All right. Is this just an angry guy because I said dreaming Spanish is a waste of time? Seems like it. Yeah, his level of literacy sounds like someone who's like into learning only with videos, because this is just like, if this is how you write in your native language, man. Whew. Okay, Oli says, I'm at a B1 level in English. Would you recommend me your natural English learn course? My goal is to reach C1 level in speaking. Yeah, I mean, everything I recommend works at every level. It's just the amount of vocab changes, the complexity of the sentences changes, but the exercises are the same. If you're starting from scratch, you need to learn vocab, you need to do shadowing and retrieval practice to learn to speak. And if you are a B1, B2 level trying to get to C1, C2, you need to do more of those things with more vocab and more sentences and longer sentences and more complex sentences. And that's it. You just have to keep doing it. Would you ever consider developing your language app? Yeah, I've thought about it. Eventually, maybe someday. It's just a lot of work. I'm super busy these days. It's there on my to-do list, but it's not as high as other things, and I just don't have the time for everything. Matex asks, how is your progress with Japanese going? Less well than I hoped for, because simply I just don't have the time. I'm struggling to get any time most days to do any learning. I'm maybe twice a week. I'm getting like an hour to learn, but I'm doing the listening, but apart from that, I just don't find the time. By the time I'm done with work, it's just late and I'm destroyed from just doing also for all sorts of other work, like clients and creating materials and things like that. But I might I might take like a week where I just do that, focus on only doing that. So yeah, this month I think I'll just. I mean, it's improving. I think I know a lot of vocab. I think I can speak a little bit now. I understand a fair amount, but yeah, could have been much faster if I was dedicating like 3 hours a day or something. But I just don't have the time. I think I'll get the time at some point this month. Like, if it's only a few days where I can learn like all day, it'll be a big jump in level, especially in my speaking. But yeah, it's this is what being an adult with responsibility looks like. This is why I talk about that video I did the other day, with 15 minutes a day, and someone was like, "You can't learn a language with 15 minutes a day." Yeah, but you know what? People ask me about it all the time, and I do say in the same video that 2 hours a day is better than 15 minutes a day. But if 15 minutes is all you got, you might as well use them right? But these days, I don't even have that. Um, okay, David Israel says, for a 10 or 20K list of sentences, how much time would you spend on shadowing and active recall? And for a list that long, do you suggest repeating the sentences 5 times or just shadow the whole list through not repeating the sentences 5 times? 10K, 20K list of sentences is just too much to shadow, I think. I think depends on the type of list. So I recommend starting shadowing with a few hundred lines on each one 5 times. And once you know all the basic vocab and your comprehension is pretty good, then you could shadow 10 or 20K list 5 times each. Then you could do it. It's going to take a lot of hours to do that, but especially if the sentences are all related to each other, like from the same family, you notice in the 20K sentence list that it's all variations of the same verbs, different conjugations and so on, but the sentences are all related groups. So that makes it, and the vocab repeats itself. So it's if it's like that, then yeah, it's doable, but it's going to be a lot of time. Yeah, 5 times each. If you shadow anything unless you're at a really high level already, uh, if you shadow everything that's normal, like uh, one sentence at a time instead of first sentence 5 times, second sentence 5 times. If you just do each sentence once, it's just way too fast and way too much to remember. That's good for listening, just in the background, but for shadowing, everything 5 times. And if it takes you a year to do 20,000 words of, no, it won't take you a year. Like 20,000 20,000 sentences, 5 times each, that's 100,000 sentences. That's 3 months. Because the thing is fast. So you can do 1 or 2,000 sentences a day if you take a couple hours. Again, if you have the time. Winston Scott says, Mikael, why do you hate comprehensible input? It's way better than language schools. It's way less effort than language schools. Language schools have have problems of their own, but comprehensible input, I don't hate it. It's just not effective as a way to learn by itself. You need to combine it with a bunch of other things. Oh, and then we got a bunch of comments here answering. Sea of Pines says he doesn't hate it, but points out that it should not be entirely relied on to learn a language. Exactly, yeah. Comprehensible input is good for maintaining and recalling what you have learned. However, initially you need to get your foot in the door in a more concrete way. Focusing on what it teaches, especially in the beginning, will make comprehensible input more effective later on. The big problem with comprehensible input is that progress will be extremely slow if it's the only thing you're doing. I've experienced this myself, for example, in German, which I've been reading for a long time, but I still can't speak. I came to realize that I simply needed more vocabulary and phrases. Yeah, could have said it better myself. And then the feisty heck says, lately he makes it sound like it's, yeah, but it doesn't. He just criticizes it. He just criticizes it much because it's become super trendy, so it points out the limitations. Yeah, it's because people sell you comprehensible input as this. So like, it's this silver bullet that solves everything. Just do more input, and it doesn't work like that. Input's a piece that's important, but it's like Paul Nation would say, 25%. I would say even hard to tell. It really depends on what you want to work on. If you want to work only on your comprehension, then more input. But even then, yeah, it's hard to give it a number. But yeah, input's necessary. It's a necessary part of the learning process, but it's not the solution to everything. And I warn against people. Again, I warn people against this line of thought uh, because it wastes your time massively. My advice is to just enjoy the input, but make sure you learn lots of vocab first so you can enjoy real enjoyable input instead of just watching bullshit like all sorts of like Spanish with Juan and Spanish with stories with Carlos and thousands of hours of bullshit that you wouldn't watch normally and you just like sitting there. You can do that in less than a tenth of the time. Learn all that, yeah, and then you enjoy real stuff that you're really interested in. Slow hardware says, not with Russia. 6 cases, 3 genders, and a flexible word order makes things more complicated. You can learn Russian relatively, not easily, but is it more complicated than, I don't know. Yeah, it's more complicated than French, okay, but is it more complicated than Arabic or more complicated than any other Eastern European language? Not really, no. It's just the same principles apply. You learn vocab and you do all the other exercises and you can learn it. Uh, Eric Soares, Eric Suarez Barretovas says, "How to improve listening comprehension? I can understand almost everything with subtitles. It doesn't matter if you. Is it a problem if you like subtitles in the target language or subtitles in your native language? As long as you understand, like, if you understand enough to enjoy the show, it's not a huge problem. How to understand better? Just watch more is one of the things, but the other one would be to do a lot of shadowing, and that will help you understand better because shadowing obviously improves your speaking a lot, but also it will help you distinguish individual words and the individual sounds and your ability to just yeah your comprehension improves a lot by shadowing, so do a lot of shadowing and maybe also learn vocab. Maybe your vocab is not good enough, you don't have enough vocab, so just memorize more lists. Hablo Fluido says, when you practice active recall using a spreadsheet, how do you space your repetition intervals? Do you do it fairly randomly or do you have a system? I use Anki, so I do it several different ways, but I use Anki, so Anki does it for me. I just review them, and if I know them well, then they'll show up less frequently, and if I don't know them well, then they show up more often. As with the spreadsheets, I just do it from start to finish once, and then I'll do it again from start to finish again. And meanwhile, you can do more repetition, like more space repetition, by listening to it. If you have an audio file of the spreadsheet and you listen to it daily, that's also like space repetition. You spacing your reps. You're getting listening reps daily of the thing. And I shadow it from start to finish, and I do active recall from start to finish, and I get most of them wrong, and then I'll do it again from start to finish. I'll do most of them right the second time, because by then I've been listening to it a lot, I've been shadowing it, and I got it wrong the first time. Yeah, there's different ways of doing it. That's an interesting one. The red telephone says, "What do you think about taking Adderall for intense work? I'm mildly ADHD. I'm very ADHD. Believe this affects my focus on the deep 1 hour plus sessions and plow through towards B2. I understand it helps for that. Never took them, would consider them for a limited time to push on. I realize the textbook response is winners say no, etc., but this is a legit pharma product taken in recommended doses for its intended purposes, not any way recreational. Honestly, I do have ADHD, probably more than you, but I'm not American, so I don't know how Adderall works. I have no idea. I've never tried. I don't think it's even. Maybe it's not even legal in Spain. Um, my advice would be to try. If it's a huge problem and anything else and nothing else works, why not? As long as it doesn't have really serious side effects or anything. Uh, yeah, the textbook response is winners say no, blah blah blah. Yeah, that's like Goggins said. You just do it anyway. And yeah, I'm like that a little bit, but also you can't be too hard on yourself. If you've got ADHD, you know you're gonna get distracted. Just my advice is to accept that you've got ADHD if you have it, and work around it, and be strategic. Get rid of distractions. Do quick breathing sessions or things like that. I do a lot of that. Just 2 minutes of meditation before learning, and especially just block everything, all the distractions, and I just focus on one thing at a time with timers. I do shorter sessions, 20 minutes often, just and then take a break. Get out to on the terrace, just fresh air, just a little bit of you know, and then go back and try again 20 more minutes and so on. Sometimes if I'm super focused, I continue after 20 minutes, but usually I take breaks. I always make sure that I've got a timer. So having a timer gives you a sense of urgency as well. You just get things done. But it's also the fact that you're aware that you're wasting time if you start wasting time, but just staying staying focused for 20 minutes is much easier than staying focused for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. So it's just 20 minutes, and you just block everything else. No phone, no email, no social media, nothing, and just one task at a time. And that's how I recommend you do it. And also write your list of tasks you wanna do, all the different learning exercises, and do one thing at a time. Because it can happen that it's a very ADHD thing to start multitasking and just jumping through tasks, uh, do a little bit of everything, and maybe I should do this, and then you it's an analysis by paralysis. So what's paralysis by analysis? Yeah, just one thing at a time, and then you just you scratch it from the checklist and you do the next one. So that's my advice. I can't give you advice on medical stuff and taking drugs or anything, especially because I have no idea how I mean, I can't give you advice. I can't give you advice in Europe, but even less in the US because I think the the stuff that's allowed there is much stronger than the stuff that's allowed here. I think that's what I hear. But I mean, you could give it a try, see how it feels. David Daygame says, "When will you start learning Thai? Probably next time I go to Thailand. I'm thinking of doing a training session, not session, training camp there again at some point. Then I'll learn." Uh, and two, second question: what I see is it's mostly about discipline. Question is not so much how to learn, or more or less clear. The question is rather how to find the discipline. Um, you write down when you're going to do it, and what you want to do, when you're going to do it, and then you do it. There's no. I mean, I don't always do everything I want to do, but and I get distracted as well very easily. But it's just start with the things that you want to do the least. That's a good one. Um, you know they're important that you have to do them, but you don't really want to do them. First thing when you have the time to learn, you just do it, and then everything else. But it's just doing it. It's a lot of it is just get rid of everything. Phone, stop checking whatever your feeds everywhere. Stand up, go silent, just breathe, think. Okay, I'm going to do this, and think about it a few seconds, and just tell yourself you're going to do it. See yourself doing it, and you end up doing it. If you tell yourself you're going to do it, you are more likely to do it. And also if you're not just constantly distracted all the time, just eliminate distractions. That's going to help you be more disciplined. Okay, Junior P6467 says, really like the videos. I just had one question. My passive vocabulary and comprehension is massive, and I can understand a very high percentage of almost every written text and speech in my target language. Would these exercises still benefit me? Your passive vocabulary and comprehension is really good, and you understand almost everything. Would these exercises benefit you? Yeah, because you haven't said anything about your speaking, right? I've always thought that trying to stay away from my native language was best to stop translating in head thing for every word. No, no, you can translate into the language. That's good. Translating from the language, it doesn't hurt either. It's just not very good for anything. But if you translate into the language and get correction, that's great. Do these exercises benefit you if your comprehension is great? Yeah, because a lot of these exercises are designed to activate your speaking, to make your speaking better, to make you more fluent. Shadowing is mostly for fluency, spoken fluency. You think faster in the language, develop muscle memory, you improve pronunciation, obviously, and then retrieval practice or active recall. You do those things, except pronunciation. You again more muscle memory, more thinking in the language, all that, and then you get feedback, so you eliminate mistakes. So yeah, these exercises are designed to make you speak better, literally. Um, Prince of Orange says, "Is that Dutch? How do you keep yourself entertained when studying for an hour or more?" You don't. You just learn. You learn as much as you can for an hour or more, and then when you get really tired, you stop. It doesn't need to be entertaining. It has to be effective, right? Not everything is entertaining. Not everything's fun. Not everything's the lazy way, the fun way, blah blah blah. That said, I'm going to give you some advice how to make it more enjoyable. The more focused you are, the more engaged you are, the the more effective the learning is going to be, and also the easier it's going to be to stay, like to continue doing it. If you are half focused, that you're thinking of something else and you're checking, the social media stuff, you're much more likely to quit. If you are super concentrated, like super focused, you are doing the exercise and you're shadowing and you constantly try to repeat the sentences and you're noticing why you're making the mistakes and you are really engaged, time flies then. You just have to put yourself in the zone. Just make sure that you're super focused. Take a minute or two in the beginning and get rid of everything. Don't check stuff. Don't think of anything else before. Just, I'm gonna go full on Bruce Lee now, but the empty your mind thing. You need to be like, just get rid of any other thoughts, anything, and just like stare at the wall for 20 seconds, and then you start without thinking of anything, and you only think of what you're doing, and it's going to be more enjoyable doing it like this. It's going to get tiring as well, but it's going to be more enjoyable. It's going to be intense. Uh, this these people. There's this guy called Ray here. You missed a key and important point. All caps. The listening and understanding practice. He comments that on a video literally called learning a language, learning a language and speaking fluently. The only two exercises you need. One of the two exercises is listening and repeating. And the guy is commenting that you forgot the listening part. Okay, what am I repeating then? Come on. Your method is good. It will help you develop a good pronunciation, and you will have thousands of ready-made sentences under your belt, which you will use templates for different situations. But then you will have to understand what the other person is saying and have to answer him, her accordingly. Because apparently, learning thousands of sentences and then being able to use them in conversation somehow doesn't help you understand all those sentences and all the vocab when you hear it. Listening and repeating improves your comprehension as well. It's not rocket science. You're listening. In fact, because you are so focused on listening, because you have to then repeat it accurately, each minute spent doing that is much more effective than just listening, because you're much more focused on form and how they're saying things and pronunciation. So it's way more effective than regular listening. But some people just want to find, like, they've got a problem for every solution. This is that's why they are where they are. Yoga Bliss Dan says, how do you choose the sentences? You write them yourself. Think of everything you want to do, all the places you want to go, all the people you want to talk to, conversations, situations, everything, and you write everything you want to say about those conversation topics, or for those scenarios, those conversations, those interactions, everything. You write everything down, you translate it, and then you create audio files to listen and repeat, and that's it. Okay, there's another angry input fan here. Soda Drinker 94 says, a whole lot of nothing. Input in all caps. Mate, 1977 called, and they want your outdated and discredited theories back. Input alone won't get you far. Input alone will eventually help you understand if you do it for years and years and years, for thousands of hours, but you will never speak fluently with input alone. And it's extremely slow, inefficient, not very good at basically anything, like acquiring vocabulary, developing speaking skills. And the reality of it is there's no science behind it or anything. It's just theories, and it's mostly wishful thinking that you're clinging onto. Anyway, enjoy your input. I don't care. Thanks for comments and questions. There's even more here. Oh, this guy is just commented exactly the same in another video. More inputs. Okay, look, calm down. Anyway, thanks for the comments and except that guy. Thanks for the comments and the questions and stuff. Keep asking if you've got questions. If I didn't ask your question, ask again. I just didn't have the time for everything. There's a lot here. And there are some I'm looking at really good questions. Roger Ramos says something about link words, and there's something about how to create spreadsheets. There's lots of good questions. I just don't have the time for everything. Because I've got other things to do. Anyway, thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you've got more questions. See ya.